Good morning, my name is Sameena Mustafa. I was a Justice Democrat in the 2018 cycle. I ran in the 5th Congressional District of Illinois, a progressive organization engaging communities of color.
Great. So very experienced and established women in this field. And so to start out, you've got basically, if you remember from the movie, you had different leadership styles when you looked at the women that were kind of the primary characters in the movie. You had Nakia, who was kind of doing more on the field, on the ground, more, rugged in a sense, type of activism and mobilization. You had Okoye, who was basically more the military, the more government-oriented, more of a protective stance. You have Shuri, who basically represents the newer generations and innovation and technology and how that plays into leadership and how it can be used as a vehicle of leadership. The Queen Mother is basically more your more reserved, traditional, generation that basically sticks kind of to the decorum, to tradition and so forth. And I would almost also venture to say Killmonger's girlfriend, who later is obviously no longer in the movie at the end. But you can see also her part somehow trying to fit and get her share of what may be out there in terms of access to power or money as well. So you have that as well. So keeping that in mind, how would you, kind of describe what styles we see, out there right now between women of color, and I know the characters are kind of some symbols, of these concepts, but how would you kind of describe the lay of the land when it comes to today?
So I think, first of all, I want to disclose I'm not a black woman. So I just want to get that out there. I am a South Asian Muslim woman, and I feel like there's a moment that I watched the film recently again, that I looked at someone like Nakia, who was literally engaging in guerrilla warfare, and I feel like women of color and particularly Muslim and black women are literally on the front lines and the ones facing the brunt of the attacks right now, and yet their leadership is sort of, or the value of their leadership is kind of lost because they're just trying to survive these attacks. So I think Nakia is a perfect metaphor for that.
So I think that where we are in history is a very interesting portion of history where I'm 28, so when I think of my mother and grandmother, they would have never dreamt of running for Congress or filing an FEC to run for Congress. And they were a little nervous for me, but have kind of insulated me into doing what black women do when we get ready to lift each other up, where it's like, I'm nervous, but we're going to try to push you across the finish line. And I think that where we are as women of color, particularly when I see black women like Ayanna Pressley, Representative Pressley, we are unapologetic right now. We are at a place where we are sick and tired of being sick and tired, as the ancestor Fannie Lou Hamer told us, and we're putting that into action. A lot of the rooms that I go in, be it business, be it education, be it medical, black women are not, we are unapologetic in what we're asking for. So in this presidential election, I have seen She the People Forum, perfect example. They did not let Bernie slide. Did they? They did not let him slide. They said, what you gonna do about saving black women who are dying while giving childbirth? Oh, you don't have an answer? Boo. we don't want that. So I think that we graduated past the point of platitudes and we want implementation because we know our worth and we know what we're bringing to the Democratic Party, to small business, to entrepreneurship, and we are requiring that of other people, that when they step to us, that they step correct. And so this is an exciting time, but it's also been very interesting to see how we even usher in young activists right now. And I know we'll get into that a little bit later, but these are young women that are not just building campaigns, but building movements. So I would say that the history and the point in time that we're in is unapologetic.
Okay, that's strong. Okay.
like to call myself a young Shuri at heart because, okay, so obviously I'm not in my 20s, but I'm actually the daughter of a civil rights activist, but I'm also an engineer. So I bring the technical capabilities into the campaign platforms of Flourish Pact. So the ways we have to reach nowadays is through social media and through other means, but also there's some playing door to door that has to go with technology because, as you know, sometimes technology isn't everything. People still want to feel flesh. They want to see people. They want to meet people. But we do use technology tools to gather people around a subject, a thought, an idea, or a candidate. And I will say, in terms of being a Shuri, but I also play the role of the supporter. There has to be black women and black men supporting these candidates, whether it is through financial means or you are showing up. The biggest thing is show up. The largest thing is to donate. I was recently quoted in a Yahoo article regarding Kamala Harris that not only do our votes matter, but our financial power matter as well. We all know that we're the biggest spenders. Let's start spending money with this campaign so she can hire young people of color and roles on the campaign so they can enable the technology tools that also has a cost to deploy in order to get all of us together.
So let me just add to Mae's point, because Mae walks it like she talks it. I remember when I announced Mae was my first Act Blue donation. She was not playing, and she donated, and then like everybody, you know, when you announce a big thing on Facebook, like people are like going ham in the comments and they're liking it. And Mae was like, yeah, I'm super excited that Kina just announced. I donated in the comments, and it made other people follow suit. And that's extremely important because we know that, I mean, even if we look at Kamala Harris, for example, who now has kind of had her breakout moment, and she is the competitor that people are competing with, whether people agree with her policy or not. But when she reported for her Q2 fundraising, Pete Buttigieg raised more money than her. Now, this is a woman who handled the second largest attorney general office or Department of Justice in the country, only next to the U.S. Department of Justice. And, you know, we have a mayor from South Bend who's a lot younger, doesn't have as much of a repertoire, but is bringing in 3 times. He's like outspending her 10 to 1. So I always think that that's interesting on the value that we place, particularly in the Democratic Party, on black women, even though we know we are the base, the core. If black women woke up one election cycle and decided not to vote, we're done, right? Period. And so I think that that's interesting as we look at the women of color who are emerging forward in these 2020 races and how we're being valued, because we know that, and Sameena can say this because she ran for Congress too, that's how people deem you viable or formidable, by how much money you're bringing in. So Mae walks it like she talks. That's the point.
So the panel is not sticking to the agenda.
I know.
So I'm going to switch the topic. So speaking about money, one thing that struck me when I first saw the movie, and to give you guys background, my family is from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I've lived half of my life in Europe, and I've been here in the States since 1997. But something that really struck me when I watched the movie the first time around was, you know, how come the women were given so much authority, right? I mean, usually we don't see this in movie or in reality, period. But, you know, coming from an African background, you know, the matriarchs are oftentimes more revered than the tribesmen or, you know, or the kings, so to speak. But I kept thinking about it, and one thought that came to me was, if it weren't for the vibranium, if there wasn't already a baseline of high economic standing for the whole community, would those women be left, you know, in those positions? Was it the money that was like, oh, we're all set, nobody's wanting, so, you know, the women were allowed, so to speak, and I don't like to use that terminology, but these women were in position of power because there was this economic and financial stability that we don't have in Africa, that we don't have here either, especially when it comes to our communities of color. So speaking about, funding, we're really talking about money, right? And if we're talking about, why this, people say, well, black women, women of color, Muslim women, why don't you run? Run and make things different. Or when they were telling Michelle Obama, well, you should run to fix the black woman problem or whatnot. It's like, it's all nice and well, but when we do stand up and we do put ourselves out there to run, who's supporting us? Because you have people like Biden, like, Bernie, who only have to breathe or exist and they have money coming to them. But what about us black women, even from our own communities, right? So we think, well, let's mobilize everybody to go vote, but at the end of the day, we can't vote for a name that's not on the ballot because they didn't have the funds to be on the ballot to begin with. So speaking about that, what would you tell, our communities especially, but also in general, what will it take to get people mobilized to understand that money really, at the end of the day, having a voice is tied to having the money to get your voice out there.
You want to go first?
Yeah. It's something that when I haven't run and had to fundraise and obviously supporting other candidates, I think it's one of those things where a lot of our electoral politics are sort of, framed by, frankly, white men, right? And so, when it comes to issues, when it comes to platforms, it's sort of like, that's impossible, we can't do it. It's you're being too bold, or you're wanting too much. And I think what we're facing right now is somewhat generational, right? So you have people who are sort of, and we were flashing, people like Maxine Waters and Barbara Lee, women who have been, Barbara Lee, her mentor was Shirley Chisholm. And so, there's no one who was more bold than Shirley Chisholm, but she was sort of told to wait your turn. You're not supposed to run for president. You're not supposed to do this. Yeah. And, but we look at women like that now and we realize they were ahead of the time. They had the sort of the vision that we are still hoping to achieve. And nobody was sort of thinking like, oh, we need to give them resources. I was mentioning to Carla before we got up here that today is the 100th anniversary of the Chicago 1919 riots, and it's completely framing how the resources are spread even in this community today. And so when you bring it back to electoral politics and you look at who's in power, Ayanna Pressley put it perfectly. I don't want a black face if they're not going to be a black voice. I don't want somebody who's going to be just check the box if they're not going to fight for the people in that box. And so but there's so much inertia, there's so much money and power into keeping things the way they are. So that's why Pete Buttigieg is going to make $24 million, because he's willing to take all the PAC money and the sort of the wealthy donors who don't want to see anything change and think that his sort of appeal to middle America is going to be enough, and aren't thinking of the base.
Right. But I think also there's this other unfortunate dynamic where even our own communities, they see like, oh, there's a black woman or there's a black man on the ballot, but really when you then drill down to the finalists, so to speak, they would rather still give their money or vote to the person who has the biggest amount of cash, who is white or who is male, versus a black young female. So even our own community at the end believes or buys into the narrative of, well, she can't win. That's not a viable choice. I'll switch over, in a sense, right?
Yeah.
And support a white male instead, because I think that person either, again, whatever the narrative is that we kind of buy into. So how can we disrupt that?
So before I even decided to run for Congress, as you know, because you helped me, Carla, I had wrote my first piece of civil rights legislation and got it passed statewide in the state of Illinois under a Browner administration. It wasn't under the cushy, Democratic, and it was a fairly progressive agenda that protected the rights of transgender women, of women of color, making sure that it was racially proportionate to the state. It was a council that will advise the governor and state lawmakers. And I got a lot of pushback from Democrats and Republicans to take the transgender language out, to take the working class community language out, because it'll be easier to pass. And my response to that was not without a fight, because I don't believe in a politics of leaving people behind. That was just my approach to policy. Because as a young working class black woman from the west side of Chicago, I know what it feels like to be cut out of resources and what the impacts of that will be. When I have conversations with men, and black men in particular in my community, they are impressed with my record to be this young and to be doing it, to be running for Congress. You know, what I explain to them is the success of black women is not to the detriment of black men. We all lift up when we raise up our women and our girls, because oftentimes black women are the voice of moral authority in this country. When we're talking about Donald Trump, when we're talking about a Roy Moore who was molesting girls in Alabama, it was black women who stood up. It didn't benefit us, but we knew what it felt like to have sexual predators roaming around or to not have the resources. When we go into that ballot box, we don't just vote for us, we vote for everybody. We vote to save everybody. And it's not just in the ballot box, it's in Congress, it's in the state legislature, it's in city council, it's in the local school council. We are voting to save everybody. And so for me, that's what I tell black men, that the success of black women is not to the detriment of you or to our community, it's to the betterment. And we just have to keep pushing that, because this isn't about winning an election, it's about shifting the culture.
I just want to add, it's hard following.
I've had some practice.
I'm sitting here because it's that conversation that makes the black female entrepreneur in me rise up and donate silently at 2:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
So these are the conversations that we hear. The heaviest users of social media is my age group. And we're lame, we can't sleep. We got all kinds of things going on in our head, in our community, in our household. So you will catch me browsing between 1:30 a.m. and 5 a.m. That's where my donations happen. And so I'm paying attention to her. Trust and believe I am. So what I'm also happy about now is the copycats that I'm getting. So they're seeing me donate, and I'm standing next to politicians, and I'm donating to their causes. Now they want to start donating. And I'm like, but that's what I want them to do. Copycat me. My playbook is wide open. Follow me on Facebook. Donate like I donate. But you don't have to do it in the middle of the night. But donate like I do. Because the issue is, they're not going to take Kina seriously if we don't donate and vote for our future and our economic future. I will tell you this, as a black female entrepreneur in the state of Illinois, I don't know how many times I've got passed over for prime contracting in the state of Illinois, particularly Illinois Department of Transportation. I'm not going to call the specific agency out, but but there are real things that supporting women like Kina and those like her will help. Hey, let's take another look at why we're ignoring our communities of color when they're approaching and trying to vie for jobs. So you'll find many of us reading and listening to this message going, this is what I want. This is what I want for my community. And so we need to pick up our donations. I don't care if it's $1, $5, $20. If you can do $5 recurring membership per month in her organization or women like her. The finances dictate. Pete doesn't have any experience. Why are we running and gunning for this dude? He don't know nothing.
Somebody was just shot in his city by a police officer.
So why are we saying that this guy, is it because he's white? Is it because he's young? Is it because he's gay? That's not a qualifying reason to be elected when you have no federal experience. And you want to get in there and make rules to judge how I live in my community. I don't think so. Look at the record and then donate to people of color who will go in and fight for you. That's just my view and why Flourish PAC was founded. Flourish PAC is a PAC organization that is currently raising money, founded by 2 black women. currently looking to raise capital so that these women can succeed. But it is that finance. Just because somebody raised $100 million doesn't make them God, and it doesn't make them smart either, or have the experience. You can't buy experience either.
I just want to add to that, since we're talking about financial support and infrastructure, I can't remember the exact number, but it's something like 90% of consultants who advise candidates are white men on the Democratic side. And I think it's maybe like 1% are women of color. And you think about, if you look at the electorate and you look at the base, specifically with the Democrats, there should be some parity, but there isn't. And when it comes to sort of having the resources to hire folks, you look at the people who have the experience as folks who can sort of volunteer because they still have resources, they can live at home or do whatever. When I went around and started to look at folks to hire for my campaign, I was really blessed with a really incredible diverse network, and I had a majority women team and majority women of color. One of my top lieutenants, my communications director, was somebody who had worked in doing field work for the Obama campaign. And that's one of those roles where usually, Kina, you can speak to this, is that they say, oh, you're the one who's going to reach out to, do African American outreach. Why can't you be the communications director? Why can't you be the strategist? It's sort of like always putting folks who are the base in sort of background, or setting them to the side and saying, no, we are the electorate you're targeting, we should be front and center, and be getting the plum contracts, to Mae's point.
And I want to add to that point. I'm sorry.
Like I said, I might as well not sit here anyway.
I just want you guys to know that these political positions are paid positions. Campaign manager, finance director, field director, volunteer coordinator. These are paid positions. You guys are missing out on a whole lot of money.
But even going to the point that if you don't have the money, if you're somebody like Kina and you don't have the money, you won't have that type of team, right? And it will be so much harder to get your message out, to be, a competitor in the field when you don't have the money in place to hire these types of people that have to be your infrastructure and your team, basically.
Yeah, and I got lucky because we did really good, in Q2 fundraising. People were really excited. I'm the first woman under 30 of color to primary my incumbent in the Illinois 7th Congressional District. So, people were really excited, and I ended up getting a full staff, even before I announced. But you have to sustain that. And I'm not just representing Kina in Illinois 7 who's running for Congress. I'm representing, when we stepped in and we started talking about political messaging and everything, we realized we don't even have a case study because there's never been a 28-year-old black woman who's running for Congress in America. So this is the first time in the 2020 cycle that people are going to see case studies. Because there's multiple of us that are running now that are under the age of 30, that are black, that are women, that'll be coming out in this cycle, but we're like the guinea pigs, pretty much. So I got really fortunate, but that's not the story of every first-time candidate. I had did a lot of community work before, so people just kind of knew me and came on off of sheer will and good faith. But a lot of the times you need the money up front if you want the top people, and the people that they deem at the top are white men. So for attorneys, we don't talk about attorneys in elections. You need an attorney. There's no way you can run without an election attorney. It's a very specialized kind of thing. When we were searching for it, I said, can we get a woman of color, or specifically a black woman, to be the attorney? There was none in Chicago. Zero. There are 6 that you can choose from, and they divvy up all the congressional candidates. So my attorney is the constant attorney that's used for elections in the city of Chicago. The good news is he has a network of people that he can help with the campaign. The bad news is, how do we build a pipeline to pay women of color who are attorneys that need to be specialized in these fields? So just keep that in mind.
very interesting. And in hearing all this, you see all the pieces that kind of go into somebody running. We see them on CNN or, you know, we hear them on NPR, but you don't understand, like, what all is going on in the background. And you see pipeline issues, you know, in the case of having an attorney, or you being, you're not I wouldn't say guinea pig, you're a trailblazer to me. You know,
Yeah.
that we don't have us where we should be and where we need to be. And again, you know, that's something that I hope as a community we can address. Really briefly, you know, everybody's familiar with the squad. You know, we've seen the attacks between he who shall not be named, I'm just joking, and the squad.
Lord
And but also, it's interesting to see, you know, when we do speak our truth, and you have responded to your truth, and you and I have had many conversations since we have known each other, where I told you one day you were going to run for public office. I think you said I was one of the first people to say that.
She did.
But when we do answer that call, when we do speak our truth, and we are authentically ourselves, we are out there, right? We're vulnerable. And you see this with, you know, the women of color that are currently serving as in Congress right now. And then oftentimes the attack is, and I think it's more of a tactic rather than a truth, right? When they say, well, you're un-American. You know, I mean, we've seen this with Omar and other women. You know, you're on this, you're on that, right? Or you anti-community. I mean, Mae just, you know, I know you and I had a conversation of how hard it was for you to get contracts here in Illinois, and you said, well, F it, I want to go to Cali, where there where you would have at least a little bit more better chances of having access to contracts, because at the end of the day, you need to eat. You know, so at one point you have to sometimes make decisions of, you know, relocating or leaving the tribe behind, so to speak, to find a path that leads you to sustainability. It's interesting, in the movie there's this scene, and I think you all remember it, when Okoye, after Challenge Day, you know, T'Challa is thrown up over the cliff and so forth, and everybody's trying to flee, and there's Okoye and Nakia, and then Nakia says, let's go, you know, we gotta go get to safety, we need to leave, right, we need to leave the tribe, right, and Okoye says, no, my place is right here, right, and both are basically saying the same to each other. They're like, I love my country, and that's why I'm going to have to do X, Y, and Z. Okoye's X, Y, and Z was I have to stay and be you know, loyal to the throne. And Nakia said, you know, we're going to go and kind of do, not a coup, but, you know, guerrilla, more revolutionary type strategies. And then again, the question is, well, who's more Wakanda than the other, right? Did one not love or stand by Wakanda than the other, right? And you kind of have this kind of discourse here in America too, right? So you have a Muslim woman, you know, that says certain things. It was like, oh, she's un-American and she's not that. And there's this whole thing of, you know, even though we have the same goals or the same vision of hope, as that we as humans have, belonging to a country, belonging to a tribe, right, or to a community. But yes, will we differ in how we will get there, or at least differ in what we think, or how we think we should get there? Absolutely. So can you speak to the whole, you know, being a woman of color that has put herself out there, right?
Do we have enough time?
That's a whole other panel, right? But, you know, how do you deal with that, and how do you see these dynamics playing out?
Kina's like, you start. So I have to say, it's seeing women like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, AOC, and Ayanna Pressley taking the risks they're taking and speaking out is really, it's inspiring, but I also anticipated they would get the pushback. I ran against essentially a member of the Chicago political establishment and the machine, whatever you want to call it. And I was the only Muslim woman who ran in the state of Illinois in the federal, as a federal candidate. And, you know, I would get questions like, do you support Sharia law? And it's like, I'm running, it's like, I was born here, I'm running as a member to, you know, defend and protect the Constitution, but yet I'm still being questioned. And so what's happening right now is an important sort of conversation, so people can see, like, this is what's happening to the squad has been happening to women of color forever, and we just, people are sort of like waking up, and I think some folks are saying, oh wow, I had no idea, like today's anniversary, or just the history that, you know, women of color, like the discrimination they faced. And it's what I want people to remember, though, that there's someone, Noah Chamba, who's a friend of ours, said, I hope that you, whatever you're seeing the squad go through, that when you see their non-famous equivalent rising up, that you are going to give her an opportunity, you know, make sure that a reporter talks to her, or that you share information about her campaign. That's really, to me, that's a real test. The squad is going to get attention because they're in Congress, and every single reporter is going to pay attention to them. But there's a lot of squad members in training who are facing the same attacks, but no one's paying attention. No, I mean, like, the one thing I remember saying, someone's like, oh, I'm supporting Eleanor, I'm giving her money because she needs security. I'm like, do you really think those racists can tell the difference between a woman with, you know, a hijab? Like, they're going to see any woman in the hijab and be like, oh, that's Representative Umar. And that woman doesn't have security. So that's real. And that is kind of my concern, and I want to just amplify that message, is that there's a whole army of squad members waiting to take, frankly, your place. So let's make sure they're safe and amplify their voices.
I really want to park here because I don't want us to rush through that. Because I am seeing a lot of women of color in the audience, and even men. I knew I was ready to run for Congress when I had the opportunity to sell my community out, and I didn't. That was when I knew. So if you Google me, you'll see that I left a gubernatory race in the last primary in a very public way, and the gentleman ended up winning. And it was after some tapes came out about some very disparaging and insensitive comments about our community and how to control our vote. And that just didn't fly with me, even though we knew that was the candidate that the Democratic Party wanted. You know, and a lot of people say, Kina, why would you speak out? Why would you make this statement? It's because my DNA, my fabric is community over profit. I don't know anything else. Because before I ever had a job, an internship, a scholarship, a position, a title, all I had was community. And when they chew us up and spit us out, all we will have is community. So we have to be very cognizant of the decisions that we make. And the same so I had the opportunity to sell my community out, I didn't. Laquan McDonald's hit the streets. That was before Donald Trump got into office. They said, why are you guys shutting down the Magnificent Mile? Because we had the opportunity to sell our community out, and we didn't. The bill that I just told you about, take the transgender language out, take the working class community out. I had the chance to sell my community out, and I didn't, right? So it's an accumulation of actions that shift the culture. Not just like the squad. I think the squad is like helping us spotlight it, but it's all those little actions that will take place that will put us and position us into a position of power. And I'll just say this and pass the microphone to Mae, is that, you know, Sameena also walks it like she talks it, because she was running for Congress during that primary, and I remember when the story broke, it was all over the news, the staffer leaves the campaign, and nobody wanted to touch me with a 10-foot pole, and here was this Muslim American woman who was running for Congress, and she called me and she said, I need you on my campaign. I need you as my political director or my field organizer. And I was like, girl, are you sure? Like, my face all over the media right now. And she was like, you know, it's less about winning, and it's more about me letting you know I believe you, sis. Like, what you went through and what you talked about, I believe you. And it was coming onto that campaign, seeing Sameena not take corporate PAC money, say Medicare for all, public free college tuition, and she didn't take a dime of corporate PAC money, and she leaned into every voter. That was a year ago. I decided on her campaign I was going to run for Congress because she showed me a real template of what it means to be somebody who put community over profit. She had the chance to sell the community out, and she didn't. And so I want you guys to, as Sameena said, in your circles, look at the people who are doing those things and start to elevate their voices too.
Next panel, I'm going to switch.
Oh no! You fight too much.
But I think
I'm just here for it.
Something Jay said earlier really struck me, and I kind of wanted to segue into this and then open it up for questions. Is, you know, what do we need to do, right? I mean, yes, the issues that the squad is facing, and you know, and we know already, right? We know this in our own communities. We see this at work. We see this, you know, in other facets of our daily life. You know, what can we do? When Mae just said that, you know, that she is awake at 1:30, 2:30 in the morning, you know, silently donating. That is sometimes, or most of the times, when I'm awake, but I'm on Amazon instead, and I'm buying the third lotion of that kind that I don't need, right? Or you know, some type of impulse buy. So I think, at least for me, you know, my takeaway will be, and I obviously, you know, support you, but to have that reflex in my mind of like, well, you know, at the end of the day, what issues will impact me, or who can impact my life on a daily basis? And it is mostly our city council, it is our state and federal, you know, politicians. So instead of, you know, getting these cute packages that make me excited that say Amazon on them, you know, instead of putting money there, put it into Flourish Bank, put it into Kina's campaign, put it into truly giving financial and sustainability to these type of campaigns, because I think we have to. Again, if we don't, you know, who else will? And I think Roy Moore was a perfect example. If we, the black women, did not speak out, you know, our white sisters were not going to.
They voted for him.
They voted for him. So at the end of the day, do I really need that pair of shoes, or do I need to get, you know, that manual petty? I mean, it sounds silly, but as these women have said today, you know, every penny counts. And it does matter, especially when we see these quarterly reports that all these candidates show us in terms of where they're at with, you know, the donations or funds that they have received. So what I would like for you ladies to kind of do is, what would you give us as our marching orders, right? Because in a sense, we are at war, I feel like, especially now, in a sense, and true survival mode, you know, because a lot of things that impact us as women of color, you know, are front and center right now, and I think now is the time to put pressure on these points. So what would you tell us as far as, you know, what your calls to action are to us in order to...
Mae, would you like to start?
shift the needle here.
I just love Kina. It set right in my soul when she spoke there. One of the things that I think those in the audience need to do is consider, number one, first, donate to the candidate. That's the first thing. The second thing is consider the role you can play in the campaign. Don't let this be a weird, foggy thing that you don't know how this thing runs. Understand what it is, what a campaign organization looks like. Envision yourself in a role in that campaign. Seek out the candidate and present your credentials and say, this is why I want to be your campaign field director or your manager. And then from there, build up your political resume to make it fit not only your own personal, but seek out the candidates so you have a track record with candidates with passion like this. Or someone else have a different passion. It depends on what your passion. But I want you to understand what an organization is. First of all, it's a temporary organization. This organization is not going to be a 5-year deal. Sometimes these campaigns are 6 months, depending on when you have to announce, there's deadlines, there's state deadlines. Figure out what these deadlines are when they have to file the paperwork to announce that they're a candidate. And start talking to these candidates and get a role. What I'm saying is, when I have political fundraisers call me and say, hey, Mae, I want you to join the fundraising committee because, yeah, I'm a previous member of the state's Abrams National Finance Council. I spent a lot of money. I don't even want to tell you what it was. It was tens of thousands of dollars being on that committee for Stacey Abrams. When they called me, I was surprised that it was a brother on her team that was a finance person. I'd never seen that. I'd never get contacted by a person of color collecting money on behalf of a candidate. If you know how to raise money, you're the most impressive. That person has a 24-hour text to the candidate about where their finances are at any given moment. It might even teach you how to get your own finances together. Yes. Being a finance person for a financial race, because it is financial. But understand that there's an organization to this whole thing. And so, on Flourish PAC website, I will announce Black Campaign Manager School right here in Chicago, right here in Illinois. And I want to say that because Kina has nobody to call. Everyone in this room could have flipped over to be a campaign manager, finance director, finance consultant, assistant to a finance person, field director, field coordinator. What are the committees? Find an office location. I'm the president, communications director, someone that's savvy with social media, graphic, digital messaging. More oftentimes, I have people that contact me who have no idea about the Black community. They have a Black candidate, and they have no idea where to even put them. Melissa. But they have nowhere where to put this Black candidate. They don't even know where to even. They don't even know what coffee shop we go to that you can even go and meet these candidates. They haven't been south of Roosevelt. But yet many of the established Black Democrats do get them. So, it's my nugget.
By show of hands, how many people in this room are thinking about running for office? Raise those hands high.
Stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up.
Let's give them a hand, everybody.
Get ready. Yes.
By show of hands, how many people have worked on a campaign? Oh, nice. Okay, there's your staff right there. And I'm saying this to say is, I know we've talked a lot about, kind of candidates, but the folks in the community are critical. There's a couple of organizations that, I don't know if everyone in here is from Chicago, organizations like Black Voters Matter, which is co-founded by Latasha Brown, a Black woman, and she was critical to the Doug Jones election. There's another friend of mine, Kat Calvin, who's based in LA. She runs an organization called Spread the Vote that works specifically on getting voters voter IDs to fight voter suppression in states where that's an issue. There's a lot of organizations that are not only helping candidates, but helping, once they're on the ballot, that folks can actually vote for them.
That's right.
And so, I want to just make sure people know that in this room could be your campaign manager, could be your finance director, and that, the people who are doing this, they don't know anything more than you do. They don't know their communities, and they all learned on the job. So, and to back up what Mae said, when I started to run and I started to look around specifically for organizations that would help candidates of color, I talked to people from all over the country. They do this all the time. They're like, oh, we just thought there were a ton of resources here because Obama came from Chicago. I know, exactly. They just assume that there's this massive infrastructure that exists, and I will tell you that I had to build it. And now it's helping women like Kina. One of the other women on my campaign, Arthea Walker Featherfield, that lives in Oak Park, and she was the only woman of color running for village trustee. Yep. And she won. And she was my policy director. So it's like that's what the possibility is. I didn't win, but the women on my team are now running and winning.
Those are facts. Because Artie ended up, she was one of my first endorsements because she's in the district. So that's true. And this is about like tangible what we need. So 4 years ago, running for Congress was not in the plans. I was just a scrappy organizer trying to turn the political landscape on its head in Chicago because we were outraged for the Wakandacon. And we were hurt. We were really traumatized. And we knew that had been going on in our communities for a really long time. Some days I wish, like, dang, if I would have never watched that video, my life would be completely different. I'll be in law school somewhere or, doing something. It changed the entire trajectory of my life because we did get a new state's attorney. We did get a new police superintendent. We did get a new mayor. We did get 4 police officers fired. We did get a police officer convicted. We did what no other major city in the Black Lives Matter era has been able to do so far. And we did it because, yes, we exercised our constitutional right to an economic boycott. Because they weren't listening before, but they was like, oh, y'all messing up our money? Like, let's start firing people. Let's start giving elections to people and passing the torch. And now we have 10 new city councilmen. And city council was the largest overturn in city council. And 2008, Barack Obama told us, yes, we can. And I'm saying in 2019, yes, we better. Because we don't have a choice anymore. Now, everybody's freaking out in the country because all these federal rollbacks are happening and Roe v. Wade and Voting Rights Act. Black folks been dealing with this. Ain't nothing unique to us. We've been dealing with this. But we do know that if it continues on this trajectory and we do not get to a place where we are bringing in representative democracy, we're going to be hard hit by whatever's happening. We will survive because we've always survived. But we don't need to just survive anymore. We need to thrive. And so my call to action to you is get out into the community, look at that kid who has a bullhorn, or even if you're picking the bullhorn up, mentor them, because if everybody in here doesn't have at least 5 mentees, something is wrong. Each one teach one. That's how we have to be, because it was, and I want people to know that too, that this is an intergenerational fight, and I've been getting a lot of that on the campaign trail too, is, oh, young people think that this is just like something new. We know this isn't new. What we did for Wakandacon was a Kingian approach from the 1960s, economic boycott. They've been doing that for the longest. So we are standing on the shoulders of giants, but we also need to be elevating new leaders in our community. The fact that we had no millennials elected into the state legislature, I think Curtis Tarver was the only one, and it was an open seat. That's not happening in the Latinx community. That's not happening in the white community. They are elevating leaders, and we have to get to that place where we're mature enough and we're comfortable enough to pass the torch. And so I would love for you to figure out a campaign that's happening in your community. Start showing up to those CAPS meetings and seeing what's going on with the police boards. I need you to figure out who's on the LSC, the local school council, in your neighborhood, and figure out who, and designate some mentees, and whatever your specialty is, each one teach one. And that's the place that we have to be in. And follow Kina for Congress. Donate. We'd like to hear from you. Thanks.
I want to thank all 3 of you for joining us today and giving us a reminder and really giving us knowledge, right? And I hope that we will all leave here today heeding your words. I wanted to see if there are any questions in the audience that you want to direct at one or the whole entire panel. Anybody?
Kina, what's your last name?
Collins.
Collins?
Yeah, and it's spelled Kina. I'm sorry?
How do I follow you?
So I'm on social media, Kina for Congress on Facebook, and then on Instagram and Twitter, it's Kina, the number 4 for Congress. And you spell my name just like Tina, but like with a K, so Kina. Did anybody else have questions? I see some other hands open. Yeah. You can, okay.
So, there's been criticism, not necessarily criticisms, but critiques about Black women's strategies on how we tend to save everyone else and tend to put ourselves either by the sides of everyone or second in place behind what everybody else is doing. And a lot of other communities, at least to my knowledge, do not do that. They put their own communities first, and that's why we see hyper elevation in other communities, like the Hispanic community, the Muslim community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. For Black women, we tend to do the communal thing inter-community wise instead of intra-community wise. And do you think that holds us back a lot of times? For example, I forget the young lady's name who climbed up the Statue of Liberty for immigration issues. And she was originally from a country in Africa. And a lot of people were talking about, see, that's our problem. That's Black women fighting for everybody else, but not doing it for ourselves. We don't see that when it comes to Black issues too much besides a communal group thing, not a single person thing. So what do you think about that?
I think there are two things at place. One is, and funnily enough, last Wakandacon, we talked about T'Challa versus Killmonger, so Africans versus African Americans, right? And how we have different mentalities of approaching, things like how do we save ourselves or how do we interface with others, right? And I think one thing is that, and Kina said it, Black women, if you look at there's this analogy about the hill, right? You have people on top of the hill, some people like on the side of the hill, and then people at the bottom of the hill. So when there's a mudslide or extreme kind of weather conditions happening, people on top are fairly okay. They get hit, but they'll be okay. People on the side, will kind of have more of an impact, and then the people on the bottom will basically be buried by it, right? And oftentimes what I see, at least as a Black woman, is we Black women at the bottom of the hill. So if we don't kind of, and again, I know it doesn't sound like it is on our backs, us speaking out against people like Roy Moore when white women didn't, right? We do that repeatedly because at the end of the day, after everything is said and done, we are often the ones that are the worst off out of everybody. So if we don't act and if we don't say anything, and nobody else above us says anything, then what's the outcome, right? So I think that there's this, unfortunately, that it's a survival thing more than anything.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And beyond that, Black women are the culture. We're the culture. Like, we do stuff, and then, did y'all see the story about there's a white woman entrepreneur selling a bonnet for $98? I'm like, really? Okay, they need to come on the Claire Maple. We got it for 99 cents. Black women do protect and covet the Black community, and we don't get enough credit for that. When we're talking about immigration in particular, and I know you were talking in the broader sense, but in my district, in my district, I have Haitians, Ghanaians, Nigerians, and they're a part of immigration as well. And what's going on with the mass deportation, no one's talking about it. My job is to use my platform and talk about what's going on with them. And then secondly, when you look at what's happening, Black Lives Matter was started by 3 Black women, queer women. So why do we continuously, and we do get that rhetoric of like, y'all save everybody, y'all don't ever save us. We've been saving the Black community. When little Black boys and Black men are gunned down, we bring the whole community out and we shut it down. Who was there for Rakita Boy? Who was there for Ayanna Stanley Jones? Who was there for Portland Arrington? Nobody was there. And so when we say we have to be cognizant when we're talking about the work that Black women do, because we've been caping up, and when I say saving everybody, that includes the Black community.
So we have to wrap it up. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
Real quick.
Okay, really quick, that's why I think it's so important for us to build coalitions, and I personally am saying, okay, let me give opportunities for and amplify messages from candidates like Kina and other women of color and other Black women, because we need to put other folks first. Like, I am specifically on the immigrant issue, my parents are immigrants, but I was born here. So I'm not gonna, it doesn't affect me, but I'm going to make sure to advocate for people because I have the power and the privilege to do so. That's
intersectionality is really standing up for your own community as well, you know, and we are interconnected. And I'm saying this as somebody who was born somewhere else and came, you know, has roots in Africa. We are interconnected. So we need to, these are narratives that certain people want us to adopt because it keeps us where we are. Where they want us to keep, it divides us. So we need to keep that in mind. Thank you so much. So you know where to follow Kina. Sign up for, check us out on speak2summit.com for other events. We have one coming up August 22nd, which is going to be on Black Women's Equal Pay Day.
Hey, run me my bag.
Yeah. So follow us, subscribe to the newsletter so that you know what else we're doing. We're doing a lot of stuff leading up to our summit next year, timely enough for the election. So please keep in touch and stick around if you want to talk to us. Thank you so much. Thank you.